Christopher McRae, everybody.
Hey, my worst fear was realized when I was waiting in the wings. So, well, my dad was in the Army, and so I was raised in a really conservative house, and we moved around a lot when I was a kid. But I was predominantly raised in small southern cities and small southern towns, and in the self-segregating South of the 70s, or the 70s and 80s, I really didn't have a lot of friends who looked or didn't look like me, and who didn't talk like me, and who didn't think like me, or who didn't believe like I did. And that tradition, or that, it wasn't by choice, it just kind of was. And when I was in high school, that tradition continued. And when I went to college, that tradition continued. And college is that time in your life where you are trying to figure out who you are, and more importantly, who you want to be. And it was at this time in my life that I believe that God brought somebody into my life who would radically change the way that I viewed the world. And that person was named Patrick Lee. And Patrick was in a study group that I was in college. And Patrick was my polar opposite. Patrick was black, and Patrick was super liberal. And Patrick was from Miami and very urban. And Patrick was outgoing, and he was student body president, and everybody knew Patrick, and everybody loved Patrick. And I was not. I was the exact opposite of all of that. I was that awkward guy who would stand in the corner at the party, and that was me. But one day in the study group, Patrick didn't show up. And then he didn't show up for class the next day. And then he didn't show up for study group the following night. So I asked around, and I found out that Patrick was in the hospital. And so I did what you normally do, and I went to go visit him. And I was nervous about going to talk to him because I didn't really know him that well. We were friendly, but not friends. And I had the introvert's internal dialogue of, what are we going to talk about? Every introvert in this room knows what I'm talking about. And so when I got to the hospital, my fear was realized and then compounded by the fact that Patrick was in the psychiatric ward, and he had tried to commit suicide. And I was absolutely terrified, but I went and talked to him. And I did what people normally do when they're in that situation where you don't know what to do. And so I just started blathering and talking and saying nothing. And it was in the middle of a blather that I heard a voice in my head. And the voice said, shut up. And I was like, this is important. Christopher, shut up and listen. And so I did. And in the silence, Patrick started talking. And I learned things about Patrick. I learned that we were very different. I learned that day that Patrick was gay. And I learned that Patrick had just been diagnosed with HIV. And that was why he had tried to commit suicide. And I learned that day that I was the only person that had visited him in the hospital. And over the next couple of weeks, I learned that I was one of only a handful of people that visited him in the hospital. And Patrick and I became friends that day. And my life has been made immeasurably richer because Patrick Lee has been in my life. He sang in my wedding, and he was the first person who called when I posted on Facebook that I was divorced. And Patrick and I still don't agree on anything. We end every conversation. We end every single conversation with, we're going to have to agree to disagree. But we also end every conversation with, I love you. And I do. Patrick is my brother. And And in this society today, we quickly put people in boxes. You know, I don't want to talk to that person because I don't agree with, you know, what they're saying. And I don't want to talk to her because I don't agree with what she does. And I don't agree with him because I don't agree with, you know, what his culture is. And I want to challenge all of y'all to, the next time you hear somebody who is saying something that you disagree with, I want to challenge you to not shut them out. And I want to challenge you to not shut them up. And I want to challenge you to shut up and listen, because this is important. And maybe God is trying to introduce you to your next best friend like he did me with Patrick Lee. Thank you.